Hello, welcome back to another episode of Kintsugi Talks podcast, where we talk about God, mental health, and everything in between. Today's episode is going to be one that is very, very hard hitting, and I would say it also falls in line with a previous episode that I did where I pretty much talked about the spectrum of suicidality and of how and why the topic of suicide itself is still a very taboo topic. And without further ado, I'm just going to want to get straight into this episode. But before we do, we're going to hear a word from our sponsor, Anchor. As of the 5th of this month, it makes it officially 7 months since my last suicide attempt. And I wanted to make an episode about this because the topic in and of itself of like the aftermath of having to come back down after a failed suicide attempt, from my point of view, I see that it's not talked about a lot. Whether it be like the person who had the failed suicide attempt themselves, or even from the loved ones that are in that person's life and are essentially taking on the role of caretakers. And I think it is something that definitely needs to be brought up in the discussion more, because unfortunately there has been too many people that have taken away their lives with suicide, but then there's an even greater amount of people who have had many failed suicide attempts, me being one of them. And obviously, this topic is not a very easy thing to talk about, but it is something that needs to be discussed. It is something that needs attention given to it, because I don't think people really understand the severity of how just deep this goes for a lot of people, especially for those who, even if it's just like one time where they've done it, or they have a history of failed suicide attempts, like myself. I have had quite a few many attempts from my past, me as a young child, essentially up until now. And I hope that for the regular listeners and people who are new listeners, that before I even dig deeper into this, know that this is like the trigger warning right here. Obviously, the topic of suicide itself is a very heavy topic. It is a topic that could be triggering for a lot of people for many different reasons. And I want to say that listener discretion is advised. And for people who may have had an actual history of attempting suicide and having failed suicide attempts, if you have the courage enough to listen to this episode, I recommend having a friend listening to it with you, a loved one, someone who is very close in your community, in your circle, And I hope that for you and for them and for every other person who is listening to this, whether it be because you can relate, whether because you need some type of comfort and want to know that there is someone who has been in your shoes and that they understand you, or for someone who just wants more knowledge on this subject. I hope that you are able to take what you need from this episode. Now, what I want to discuss in particular for today's video, especially with the topic at hand, is just exactly the toll that it has taken on me in many different areas of my life. And I would even say, like, it's just for this particular time, like most recent 7 months ago, it's been for pretty much every time that I have had a failed suicide attempt. And I broke it down into 3 categories. The first category being spiritual toll, second category being the emotional toll, and the third category being the physical toll. So I first want to get into the spiritual toll, how it has affected me in many different ways spiritually. So the first thing that I will say is that I definitely have a fear of expectancy. I have a fear of just wanting to accept new things, and I am fully aware that that is bad. And then, of course, like, I call myself a Christian, yet it's like I have a fear of expectancy. So it's like I don't believe that God is gonna pull through the way he says he does. And it's like, not even that I don't fully believe that guys are gonna pull through, because there's been many a time in my life where I thought God would have pulled through, and he didn't just pull through, but he pulled up. Like, he showed up like he said he would. But it's the fact that he wants to do it, and it's the fact that it's actually going to happen. Because the true thing about it is that I get tired of having to continue with what I deal with every single day. And only God knows for how many more years of my life that he wants me to have to endure with having a diagnosis of depression and anxiety and borderline personality disorder. And then on top of that, being a Christian and literally being a mentally ill Christian. That sentence doesn't make sense. I feel like I am a walking oxymoron all of the time. And I'm pretty sure there is other listeners who can relate to this feeling that I have. The second point for how I've been spiritually affected is that I have a lot more moments of questioning God. And this ties into the first one, because one of the questions that I ask God a lot is, but why? But why did this happen? Why did you not intervene sooner? Why would you even want to bless me with this? Why would you promise me a good thing when you know it's hard for me to believe in good things? Just like all those type of questions. And it comes from a place of doubt, most definitely. Like I am self-aware to know that it's like I do have a internal struggle with doubt and definitely a lack of faith. But I am aware that because I know where it comes from. I know that it comes from the fact that I have dealt with chronic trauma. Chronic meaning that it has happened like more than once, and it has happened in a way that it's like just back to back, almost like a domino effect. And if you've been through a significantly painful, emotionally damaging, traumatic event enough times, it will change you. It will change the way you look at things, look at people, look at life. It'll change the way you think about your life, about others. And I'm not saying this to sound like some type of excuse, but I'm just saying this because this is my reality. And I am self-aware enough to know that my feelings are valid because I went through a very real experience where these feelings came and have become a part of the way I talk, the way I act, the way I think about certain situations. But I also know that my feelings are not always 100% true, meaning that I can't live in my feelings, unfortunately. And with dealing with something like borderline personality disorder, where I can feel very high highs, but those lows are very, very low, and they hit so hard. I don't think there's enough similes to describe or put into comparison of just how hard the lows hit and even how hard the highs hit. Because when I'm high, there's times where it's like I'm almost in a euphoric state of mind, and that's not a safe place to be in. Because when you look at the word euphoric or euphoria, like you can even think of the show Euphoria that was like a huge hit on HBO. It's like all the different characters of the show, like the one kind of thing you see in all of them in different ways is that they develop this like God complex. And for me, when I reached this kind of like level of just like euphoria, it's like, oh, I can take on anything. And by anything, 9 times out of 10, it's something that I have no business doing. Something that I have absolutely no business doing, that it is very harmful for my spiritual, mental, emotional, physical health, even sometimes financial health too, because reckless spending is a problem. It definitely is a problem for me, and I'm not working right now and I'm broke. So that is something that fortunately I don't have to deal with, is reckless spending. And now to kind of connect that to the third point that I have here for just a spiritual toll that is taken on me, is that doubt and second guessing is second nature to me. And again, this ties into the point that I just made of how these like feelings, these thoughts that I have are natural to me because they have come from me experiencing chronic traumatic events over and over again. And when you've gone through something super painful enough times, like when you've had your heart broken enough times, you're gonna learn to not trust people. When you've been physically abused enough times, you're gonna develop a fear of physical touch. When you have been lied to so many times, you're gonna learn to not take other people's words seriously. or even take yourself seriously. Because those people that lied to you, they probably didn't take you seriously or care enough about you to be serious enough about you. So you're not going to take yourself seriously. You're not going to take other people's words seriously or their feelings towards you seriously the way that you should. Next is the emotional toll. The first point that I have for the emotional toll that it has taken on me is that I constantly feel like I am on autopilot. The best way that I can explain this is that there will be a lot of times where I will physically be there in the moment, but mentally I've checked out. And then by the end of the day, I will have looked back and be like, I don't know how I did that. Like I wasn't even there. And there'll even be sometimes, it'll sometimes even go to this extent where I will be like traveling somewhere and then I get to wherever I was traveling to, wherever my destination was. And then like a bit into me being there, I'll just have this like blank out moment and then ask myself, how did I even get here? Like, why am I here? Like, just, it's like my body is running, but my mind is on empty. That's the best way that I could describe it. Next point would be that fatigue has increased for me. Fatigue essentially is the state of constantly being tired, not even just physically, but emotionally as well. I deal with insomnia. I have had a pretty bad insomnia since I was a child, for as long as I can remember, really. And because of it, my sleep cycle has gotten really bad. There will be days, like, there will be like one day where I'm running on no sleep. And then it would usually be like a bit early afternoon time where I would just like crash, wake up only like 4 or 5 hours later, and then I'm up all night, and then I won't go to sleep until like 6-7 a.m. the next morning, sleep all day, wake up to like late early afternoon, and that cycle just keeps going and going and going. And even though when I do sleep, I'm not restful at all. I sleep, but I don't rest. I never feel rest when I go to sleep. And that even with however many hours of sleep I get, it's recommended that you get like at least 6 hours, the maximum 8. I'm lucky if I get 4. And even with those different varying amount of hours for sleep, I will wake up and feel like I have not slept in days, which that has happened to me before with my insomnia. There's been one time where I didn't sleep for a week, and there was one time not too long ago, I want to say this was December. This definitely happened in December, where I didn't sleep for 3 days because I was having these horrible panic attacks that were just, the thought in my head was just like, I cannot close my eyes. I was literally too scared to go to sleep. The third point I have is recognizing my sense of comfortability and numbness. It is so easy to shut everything off, especially when you are in a constant state of just being overwhelmed. You feel like whatever situations you are dealing with, whatever struggle that you've had to struggle with for so long is just super loud in your brain and your heart, and it makes your heart hurt and literally break, that you just want to shut off everything, not feel anything, be literally numb. Number 4 is guilt and shame for the right and wrong reasons. And when I wrote this in my notes, I put the word wrong in quotation marks because, again, it's for things that I think are wrong, but they're not wrong. And a lot of it when I initially brought these notes together to want to record this episode, a lot of the things that came up in my head when it comes to guilt over things that aren't even bad is my eating habits. Literally right now, I eat one, maybe on a rare occasion 2 meals a day, and I am not quite sure if I shared this in a previous episode or not, but my disordered eating habits started from when I was a child because I was constantly judged about my weight from my mom and the rest of my family. Me and my mother had went to my pediatrician for an appointment checkup, and the doctor that was there said to wait for my stomach to stop growling, and then I could eat. That habit is something that I've unfortunately still picked up till this day. So I only eat literally one meal a day, whether it is takeout, whether it is home cooked food. It's one meal a day for me. Number 5 is that new BPD symptoms have surfaced, and I would say the one that has surfaced that I actually noticed before, but it wasn't as strong as it is now. And that symptom being that I see illusions. I will see what I think are shadows in the corner of my eye. I will hear these phantom noises. The main one being my phone vibrating. And there was one night where I wanted to just test to prove to myself that I had was hearing these fake vibration noises. I had put my phone on silent and then slept throughout the night. And during that night, I kept hearing and even kind of feeling vibrations because my phone isn't on my bed, but I have it sitting on a chair next to my bed. And so I remember mid being half asleep, half awake, I grabbed my phone from where it was on a chair and I had just kind of placed it next to me because I swore that I heard it vibrating, but it wasn't. It was a literal illusion. Well, in that case, a audio illusion for me. The last point for emotional toll is more overthinking and second guessing myself, which this is in connection to the doubt and second guessing being second nature to me for the spiritual toll. But it does take an emotional toll on me as well. This is more so a trait of anxiety, but when you really think about it, a lot of things like that are connected to anxiety and depression, because anxiety and depression, they are disorders, they are mental illnesses, but they are also symptoms of other mental disorders and mental illnesses like BPD, bipolar, schizophrenia. The list goes on and on. Next is the physical toll. So, the first point that I want to talk about for how it has taken like a physical toll, physical effect on my body is that I have grown even more resistant to medication. And I know this may be confusing for some people, but I will try to break it down in the best way that I possibly could. So, ever since I was actually a child, medication just never seemed to work well with my body. I remember there was one time, I want to say I was like 6 or 7, or probably younger than that, and I had this really bad, like, cold, I believe it was. And the cough syrup that I remember taking, and I'm pretty sure it was Robitussin, and I remember it made me even more sick. And every time I took it, it would come back up. And I just remember this one scene that's like playing in my head, that my brother was carrying me in the bathroom, like trying to like console me because I had like just finished like throwing up the Robitussin that I took. And since I was first diagnosed with depression and anxiety in 2016, from 2016 up until July, when my most recent suicide attempt happened, I have been on 6 to 7 different medications. And all of them were somewhat different from one another. I mean, the main difference being their names were different. But there was like slight differences in like the type of effects they would have on my body and the actual like usage of what they are for. And from 2016 up until last year, that is 6 years. So 6 years I was on 6 to 7 different medications, and none of them helped. There was even one medication that I took that it actually increased my suicidal ideations. So I had to stop taking that for obvious reasons. And in my most recent hospital stay, because with this most recent suicide attempt, I put myself in the hospital. And the medication that they gave me, it was medication that I was previously on, but I had stopped taking because it wasn't working. And so they put me back on the medication for the 2 weeks that I was in the hospital, and it wasn't doing anything. Was not doing anything. I felt the same. Still had the same thoughts, still had the same struggles. But knowing that if I told them that it's like, oh, this medication is not working, they would have forced me to stay in the hospital. They would have forced me to keep continuing taking medication, and it would have forced even more medication into my system. That is unfortunately the reality of being in a psych ward, of going to any type of place like that to be to receive medical attention. The second point that I want to take is that, to add on to the first point actually, but the second point is that I am scared to take medication. So with my last attempt and many attempts that I've had before in the past, the method that I use to try to take my own life is overdosing on pills. And most times the pills that I would use were pills that I was prescribed by my psychiatrist. And if it wasn't those type of pills, it would be over-the-counter medication that I had in my cabinet, most likely painkillers and cold medicine that I had. And I want to start off by saying that I don't want to do it again. I do not want to harm myself in any way, shape, or form. Okay? I just deal with these thoughts on the daily. It's very intrusive thoughts. Like with literally any little thing that is like, oh, you could use that to do this. Or you could do this to like cause this to happen to yourself. It's an everyday thing. It's thoughts that I have to fight with every single day. I don't want to deal with these thoughts. I really don't, but that is my reality. And so being that is literally a part of my history, as far as like mental illness, like medical history. um and God forbid I get to a point where I do want to take my own life, and there is some type of pill around. It could be any type of pill. That'll be an easy access point for me. And now, I've had many people in my life say this, like, oh, you could like have someone hold your medication for you. You could have like a friend come pick it up. I don't have friends like that. I mean, I do, but they all have lives. They're all very busy. They all work 9 to 5s or 10 to 8s. They all work, and all of them live very far from where I live. So why would I put them through the trouble and hassle of having to travel probably at like almost the crack of dawn to come to my house, watch me take my medication, take it back to their house to hold it in their cabinet or whatever, and then they have to go back to work, and then probably come back to my house in the evening so that I could take my evening medication? Why would I put my friends through all that stress? Is unnecessary. And also, knowing, like, again, with the first point that I made, like, in the span of 6 years I took 6 to 7 different types of medication, and none of them worked for me. So with that, I don't want to be put back on medication, which is why right now I don't have a psychiatrist, because I know with my medical history, with my suicidal past, with my mental health history, they will want to put me on medication. And I am not ready for that. Not even that I'm not ready for that, is I just don't want to do it. The third point for a physical toll is chronic pain. Now, you're probably wondering, like, how is your body in pain so much, and how does it affect to your mental health, like mental disorders? Literally everything in the body is connected. The mental emotional is connected to the physical. It is in one system. It is in one whole system, which is like our human body. So one kind of connection that I will make a story. When I was younger, I used to have a very hard time like holding my urine. Like, I used to have very hard time like controlling my bladder, because my anxiety was at an all-time high when I was young. I literally did not stop peeing in the bed until I was in middle school. And in middle school, I was severely bullied to the point where that's when I did start cutting myself. That's when I did start actually having suicidal attempts. And it was really bad. And then in high school, I wasn't like peeing in my bed anymore, but I was having trouble holding my pee, because obviously being in high school, like, because like there's like elementary school bullying, there's middle school bullying, but then there's high school bullying. High school bullying is like on another level. Like, you see all these like Lifetime movies of like these girls getting bullied and stuff. That is real. Okay, I know they make that stuff for like media, and they try to like probably make it extra and stuff, but that happens in real life to people. Like the girls whose social anxiety is so bad that they sit in the bathroom and eat their lunch. They isolate themselves. They don't even pay attention to class. They just have their headphones on and read a book. That is the effects of being isolated due to being bullying. And it affects you mentally, obviously causes you to be depressed and anxious. And then with the physical toll, it makes you so tired. Like, literally you having to fight with these emotions and these thoughts that we didn't ask for. We did not ask for. At the end of the day, it turns into a response of our body. Like, it turns from like an emotional weight to a physical weight. Like, because our body is able to tell when we are in emotional pain. Note that for anyone, if you know anyone in your life that they deal with any type of mental health issue, it doesn't even have to be like the actual diagnosis. They could be probably dealing with like seasonal depression, or they overwork themselves with their job, or they're under emotional stress of like being being a single parent, or just having kids in general, or they're that sibling that has to take care of the other siblings because their parent isn't doing their job. Note that they're probably the ones that have the weakest immune system. Yeah, they probably have the weakest immune system. And also for yourself speaking, if you notice that you are under a lot of emotional stress, or if you have like depression, anxiety, whatever it is, how many times a year do you get sick? How many times out of nowhere do you find that you get chronic migraines, back pain, your muscles are sore? Mind you, you don't work out. You don't work out, you don't do that much exercise. You may walk here and there, but you don't do that much exercise, yet your body is in pain. You have chronic migraines. You get these shivers down your spine for no reason. That is literally your body carrying the emotional stress of dealing with mental health problems or dealing with a mental illness issue. So I deal with that myself. I don't get sick a lot of times throughout the year, but when I get sick, I get really sick. Really, really, really sick. I think the last time I got really sick was probably like last year, I want to say, or probably even before that I had caught the flu. First time ever having the flu. It whooped me. Oh my God, I was out for a week. I had a horrible fever, like horrible congestion. My body was in so much pain. That was like the last time that I got really sick, and I was out for a week. Right now, I would say like the most I'm sick is for like 3 days. But when I get sick, I get really sick. And I deal with chronic pain a lot. Now, I do not work out. I don't exercise. And I get a lot of pain in my back, in my legs, and my arms. And I also deal with chronic migraines. I've been dealing with chronic migraines since I was like 8 years old. So, yes, that is the chronic pain connected to the physical toll that it takes on my body. And the last thing that I want to add on to for physical toll is that my insomnia has gotten worse. So as of recently, this was in December, the December that just passed. There was a time, like one point in that month, where I didn't sleep for 3 days. Mainly because I was dealing with really bad panic attacks, but I did not sleep for 3 days. So it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday that I did not sleep. And then going into Sunday, I was still up for those 3 days. So I guess that's technically 4. And I remember that Sunday I went to church. I got dressed up as normal, but I was just like out of it. I was not there. I was even dozing off like during the service. And I was just not okay. And insomnia is something that I have been dealing with since I was very young. Very, very young. The most that I have gone without sleep when I was like young, like I want to say like probably like middle school going into high school, was a week. There was one point in time where I went a week without sleep. And how my insomnia looks is that I will either go to sleep at a decent time, but then wake up in the middle of the night and I can't go back to sleep at all. So say like I go to sleep at like 10 p.m. I somehow become wide awake at 3 a.m. And then I stay up all the way until it's about like 11 a.m. And then 11 a.m. I go back to sleep. And then I don't wake up until the late evening. And then since I'm wide awake in the late evening, that leaves me awake till like past midnight to the next day. And then there's times where I will lay down in bed and it's just like I can't sleep for like I can't sleep for nothing. So it's a mix of those two different things. And also there's times where it's like I don't want to sleep. And this is connected to more of an emotional thing where it's like I don't want to sleep, because I know I'm gonna have to deal with this. It's gonna be like a reset the next day when I wake up. And then again, when I do sleep, that's like the only time where it's like my brain is kind of off in the sense of like my thoughts aren't running all over the place. But then again, those thoughts turn into dreams and nightmares that I continuously have over and over again. I know a question that is probably in a lot of people's minds, and a question that I get asked a lot by my loved ones is, how was your way of thinking at that time? Like, what led you to want to do that to yourself, And how can I change that and try to move forward from it? So, what I kind of brought up earlier was the fact that I deal with intrusive thoughts. Intrusive meaning that they just like barge in. They barge in, they kick down the door, like very much like SWAT team, like trying to track down a mafia gang member or leader. And being that they are intrusive in that way, they're hard to control. And I don't know when they're going to come into my mind. I don't know. I unfortunately don't have control over it. I wish I did, but I don't. And with all the times that I did have a failed suicide attempt, including the one that happened 7 months ago, was I was in a space where I felt nothing and didn't care that I felt nothing. I was overwhelmed, and because of each of those times, I was dealing with something that just took me over the edge, added onto stuff that I was already dealing with. Just constant chronic emotional pain, traumatic experience, one after the other, like a domino effect. That has been my whole life, really. My whole life is filled with a lot of traumatic events that I've unfortunately have had to endure. And I remember when I was in the hospital recently, well, when I got out the hospital, a very dear person to me had told me that they noticed that it's like I'm like something has like changed about me. There's like something different this time around, where I guess it's like I'm trying more, maybe. But then their version of me trying more, I see it different as my version of trying more. My version of trying more is that I am in constant survival mode. I'm not living. It's like I don't focus on living. I don't care to live. I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to survive getting through a day where the minimum amount of intrusive thoughts I want to deal with is like 2. I'm trying to get through a day where I can actually control myself from not crying because my brain is telling me you need to have a meltdown. I'm trying to get through a moment where My anxiety doesn't kick in because I'm surrounded by people that I know are going to ask me questions about how my life is or how I'm doing, and I know I can't give certain answers. And then in my head, I'm trying to rehearse the lines that I was talking to myself in the mirror for situations like this, because I like to be over-prepared. Every day I'm surviving. People on the outside seeing as me fighting, I'm surviving. And there's a difference. Surviving is a means of me trying to protect myself. Fighting is a means of having a sense of victory over something already. Having a strength to know that you can defeat something. And I don't feel that way about myself, to be honest. With depression, anxiety, and borderline personality disorder, that itself is what I would like to call a cocktail of mental disorders. And it's not to say that I don't think God can make me better, it's not to say that I don't think that God can't heal me from this. He can, but he doesn't have to. God doesn't have to heal me from anything. God doesn't have to take me out of any situation because he's God. He can do that. And he can have a reason for doing that. And I could never know the reason for the rest of my life. And that's a reality that I've had to very quickly learn, that this is something that I may have to deal with for the rest of my life until my time on this earth is over. Whenever that happens. So, one thing that I have tried to change about myself, or change that I've added to my life to try to help better cope with a lot of things that I struggle with, and to help hopefully further prevent me wanting to commit that act again, is making a safety plan. Now, if you follow me on my mental health awareness page on Instagram, which is _unique_vessel, I actually made a post about this, of how to develop a safety plan and what it is. So, for those that don't know, a safety plan is pretty much a list or chart of ways to stay safe that can reduce the risk of future harm. And this can include planning for a future crisis, considering the options that you have to help further push the outcome of a crisis happening away, and making decisions about your next steps. And it consists of 6 different things. So the first thing that you want to write down and know what it is your warning signs. You want to identify what your warning signs are. So the 2 questions that you should have in your mind when it comes to your warning signs is, what are my thoughts, mood, or behavior during times of crisis? And the second question is, what do you experience when you feel extremely distressed? Number 2 is to develop internal coping strategies. What can you do to take your mind off of your problems without having to contact another person? So again, things that you could do on your own by yourself. You can practice a relaxation technique like prayer, meditation, or you can engage in a physical activity like going to the gym, or any type of physical hobby, anything that involves some type of movement with your body. It could be crocheting, it could be knitting, painting, or even going on a walk. Number 3 is to identify people and social settings that provide a distraction. So, who or what social setting will help take your mind off your problems for a little while? Who helps you feel better when you socialize with them? So, for example, say you have a friend that likes to watch football. When you are feeling down, you could go watch football with this person. It provides a distraction and it allows you to enjoy the company of your friend without having to talk about your feelings. So you can make like a list or a chart. Like you could put the person's name, put their phone number, and then put the place where it could either be their house or a place that you usually hang out with this person, or a different social type of setting that brings you some type of peace, like going to the park or going to the museum or even going to a restaurant, a library, a cafe, any type of social setting that gives you some type of inner peace and relaxation. Number 4 is making a list of people that you can ask for help. This could be family members or friends that you can contact during a time of crisis. So again, like the last point, you would make a list, have this person's name and their phone number next to their name. Number 5, make a list of professionals or agencies to contact during a time of crisis. So the first thing you would put is your clinician's name and phone number. This could be your primary care doctor. This could be your psychiatrist. This could be your therapist. This could even be your social worker, if you do have a social worker or caseworker, along with their phone number. Emergency contacts. It is very important to have some type of emergency contact. Again, this could be a clinician, a medical professional that you have. This could be a family member. This could be a friend. This could be your pastor. This could be a coworker. This could be your boss. Urgent care services. Now, depending on the area that you live in, urgent care services can look different for everybody. And then along with that, there is things like the suicide prevention lifeline phone number. And then there's also the suicide crisis and crisis lifeline. So the suicide prevention lifeline phone number, I also have this number in the description of the show, but that phone number is 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255. And then for the suicide crisis and crisis lifeline, it's 988. Lastly, for number 6, how can you make your environment safe? Now, when it comes to safety plan, this is obviously good for the person who deals with time of crisis, who deals with some type of mental health struggle, but then also for the loved ones that are in this person's life. So it is good to make a safety plan with that person. Call them up. You can even make this kind of like a hangout session. This is your time to really ask those questions that you want to ask that person, to get to know more of what they struggle with on the daily. So it is important to encourage your loved one to complete a safety hand and to keep it handy nearby. They could save it on their phone. They can print it out, keep it in their purse or their wallet. If they need to tape it up on the wall next to their bed when they wake up, they need to tape it up in the inside of the cabinet in their bathroom, do it. And also ensure that you, the loved one, have a copy of it too. The safety plan is designed to build a person's sense of internal focus of control and is a helpful resource for both you and your loved one during a time of crisis. That is it for today's episode. I hope that this episode has given some insight and knowledge to people who probably didn't know a lot about things relating to this topic. The spectrum of suicidality is indeed a spectrum. There are so many different factors and layers to it. If you want to know more about it, the recent episode that I did before this, I believe, is where I talked about why the topic of suicide itself is such a taboo, and I tried to break down in as many ways as I possibly could the different types of suicide there is, why it even happens, and even went forth into statistics and things like that. So yes, I hope this episode brought a lot of knowledge to people, and also to those who are fighting the fight of having dealt with a suicidal past. And it could have been months ago, days ago, years ago. I want you to know that you are not alone in your fight, and that there is a hope at the end of whatever tunnel that you are trying to walk, crawl to. And I hope that this episode gives you some type of reassurance that it will be okay in the end. I don't know how long it'll take, but it will be okay. To the listeners who have taken the time to listen all the way to the end of this episode, I appreciate you all very, very, very much. Please continue to show support to my podcast. The link for how you can do that will be down below. Also, this podcast is available to listen on Spotify, Apple, Google, and the rest of the links of where you can listen to will be the description below. As of right now, I plan on recording a new episode or having a new episode up for the podcast once a week, and I will try to have it uploaded on the same day every week. So the time this episode goes up, it'll be for Friday, February 10th. So every Friday, I will try to have a new episode up. To stay updated, make sure to follow Kintsugi Talks Pod on Instagram. The username is @Kintsugi Talks Pod. There's no spaces in between. All the letters are lowercase. And again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being a supporter. And until then, God bless.